Okay, so let's talk chart of accounts. So you remember I keep talking about all your transactions going on over here. Well, your chart of accounts is whenever you decide to create sub-buckets or subcategories. So this would mean, let's say that you created a subcategory called advertising. You maybe spent money this month on MailChimp as your email provider. Maybe you had web hosting cost. Maybe you had to purchase a domain for your website and you're using that for promotional materials. Maybe you went to Staples and you bought some business cards and you said, you know what, when I'm looking at my income statement and I have all these expenses listed, I really don't want a laundry list of 400 expenses. I want to group them, but I want to group them into these categories. So I'm going to create this bucket that I'm going to call advertising, and I am going to group all of those expenses, your MailChimp, your web, all of these different things, into a bucket called advertising. So that is all that it's doing. Whenever you ever hear anything referred to as the coding, the chart of accounts, all it is taking the population of transactions and you create your own cheat sheet to say, if this category of expense, then put it into this bucket. And so what that means, if you think about the purpose of your accounting system, again, is so that you can get two pieces of paper. You can get your income statement and your balance sheet at the end of the year. Ultimately, you want to make sure that if you want an income statement that is going to let you see the details of all of your salary and all of your payroll and contractor costs, then that's going to be a bucket you might want. Here's where people run into a little bit of a trap. So they either complicate their life to no end by creating this very complicated chart of account, and then they can't remember what expenses they put into what different buckets. So they'll try to summarize things in these 20 different buckets, but forgetting that the bucket is a tool there to help you. You actually don't need to use sub buckets. If you wanted to, there is no reason from an accounting perspective that you could not have a chart of account for every single vendor. That's right. It's not common practice. It's not typically what's recommended, but if you wanted to, you actually could have advertising MailChimp, advertising web hosting, advertising domain name. So remember, your chart of accounts, you are in control of. You are in the driver's seat. It's your buckets so that you know and you understand and you can dissect your own numbers. The other thing to be really careful about with the chart of accounts is making it flexible. So it's something that whenever you're first starting up your business, you might either go with the quote unquote system defaults. Be very careful of that because there's such a variety of different types of businesses. So what's relevant for you to analyze on a granular basis every month might be very different than any kind of defaults that someone else is recommending for you. So make sure that your chart of accounts is working for you and you're not working for it. The other thing to just, again, when I kind of go back to flexibility all the time, keep it incredibly flexible because when you're starting a business, you're at that startup phase, there is a lot of unknowns. You might think that what you're going to spend over the next 3 months will be on these different types of purchases. And 6 months later, your business might have pivoted and gone in a totally different direction. The amount of changes that happen in a business in the first 5 years is dramatic. So having a really, really fixed, static chart of accounts based on something that worked for you or for what you thought was going to work for you 3 months in, holding yourself hostage to that 3 years later when your business has evolved, don't do that. Your chart of accounts exists for you and only for you, not for your bookkeeper. There are certain mandatory categories that you're going to want to have in your chart of account in order to make sure that your tax accountant can pull out the information they need for those particular fields. But 99% of those fields are highly, highly aggregated. So you are in most cases going to be perfectly fine. If you want to make sure that your chart of accounts will still meet those areas, all you're going to do is just a quick Google search for the CRA tax form, and you can just go and look through what those categories are. It's accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Let's say I really want to group all of my professional development and all of my training into, 2 different categories. I don't know what their categories would be, but say you just really want to group them. You can do that. Or if you want to amalgamate all of that with your office supplies and kind of treat that as your general overhead, you can do that. So don't feel hostage to your chart of accounts. Make your chart of accounts work for you and don't treat it as anything more complicated than the buckets. So kind of that intermediary of every single transaction that happened in your business. Chart of accounts is the buckets in between. The output of everything is 2 pieces of paper, your income statement and your balance sheet. All right, you got this. So I heard this story the other day that is almost too good not to share. And it's really all about unintended consequences. But it happens in New Delhi and it has to do with snakes. So many, many years ago, the British colonized India, and there were all of these poisonous, venomous snakes there. So the British kind of came in, they didn't like having these snakes around, they were terrified of them. So they said, well, what can we possibly do to be able to cut down on it? So they decided to put in place a bounty, essentially a reward for anyone that would capture and kill a snake. And so you would kind of get a certain bounty associated with every single snake that you would kill. And so that was perfect. That solved the problem until someone kind of got a little bit smart. And so they said, well, wait a minute. If I get X dollars per snake that I kill, what would happen if I just start breeding the snakes and kind of create my own farm of them? And then I don't have to go out and hunt for them and track them down. They're all right there. So I'll just kind of go kill the snake in whatever way you actually kill a snake. And then, kind of take all of this and collect this massive bounty. So all of a sudden, hold up. Like, no, this is not okay. This, like, you found a loophole. This is not what we're intending. You know what? We're scrapping the entire bounty program. Forget about it. It was a super bad decision. So yeah, we're not going to deal with it. And that's cheating. It's not what we want. So then what do you think the person breeding the snakes did, right? At mass scale. Because it wasn't just one person doing it. Well, they kind of said, well, if that's the case, we'll just release them into the wild. We have no need for them anymore. They're not worth anything to us. So in the end, despite this really well-intended idea to cut out these poisonous snakes, what ultimately happened is the population of poisonous snakes in and around the New Delhi area back then actually grew even worse than what it was when they had first started out. So I think the whole idea is around unintended consequences. And it's so important to think through anything that you're doing. What is the unintended consequence of it? Because sometimes the best intention, the best well-laid plans can actually have some pretty significant negative consequences. So kind of train yourself to think of those second-order consequences associated with anything that you implement or try out.